Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today we're looking at a really fascinating time, the Ice Age,
Hmm.
and specifically how early Homo sapiens, people like us, navigated the Pyrenees
Right.
Mountains.
And the common idea is these huge mountains were just like a wall, right?
Yeah,
Completely impassable.
exactly. You picture ice, massive peaks, something that just kept people apart.
Hmm.
But the research we're looking at today, well, it really challenges that, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The evidence, it actually points towards a lot more movement, more connection than you might think.
So that's our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
Really get into that evidence. We want to understand, okay, how did these crossings actually happen? What were these early humans carrying with them? I mean, imagine trekking across that landscape.
Yeah.
And what do these journeys tell us about their lives, their interactions? We'll be uh, mainly looking at archaeological findings, flint tools, ornaments, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So just think for a second. Crossing those icy mountains tens of thousands of years ago, what clues would you even leave behind?
Well, let's try and picture it based on the sources. Imagine, like a misty morning, maybe. A small group, probably not huge, maybe a dozen people.
Okay.
Adults, kids, maybe even infants wrapped up somehow. They'd have likely leather packs carrying your essentials.
Right.
And inside those packs, pieces of flint, some rough chunks, maybe some finished tools, sharp flakes. And these weren't just random stones.
No.
They were vital for survival, for making tools, maybe some pieces like ornaments had personal value too. They were, a link back to where they came from.
And the research points to specific places, right? Like the Cerdanya Valley in the Pyrenees.
Yes, exactly. And within Cerdanya, there's a site called Montlleó. It's fairly high up, about 1,100 meters or so at Col de Sag. But crucially, it seems it was passable.
Even during the really cold glacial periods.
Apparently so. The research suggests Cerdanya wasn't just like frozen solid everywhere. It acted as a kind of refuge
Okay, refuge.
and a meeting place. This is really key. It seems different groups, maybe from the north side, maybe from the south side of the mountains, kept coming back there, generation after generation.
So it wasn't just about getting through the mountains. It was a destination in itself, almost. A social hub.
That's what the evidence suggests. You can almost picture them, right? Maybe sharing stories after a tough journey, exchanging information.
And exchanging actual things, too. The sources mention that.
Oh, definitely. While, ideas are hard to see archaeologically, the objects are clear. We find things like seashells, perforated ones, probably for necklaces or decoration.
And those shells wouldn't naturally be up in the mountains.
Exactly. They must have come from coastal groups. And maybe in return, those coastal people got high-quality flint from inland areas. Or perhaps things like deer antlers, reindeer antlers maybe. Good for making tools.
So there's this flow of materials, suggests maybe early trade, or perhaps alliances, relationships maintained through gift exchange.
It certainly points towards interaction beyond just bumping into each other. A level of established connection, perhaps.
Which brings us to their hunting tools. Projectile points, obviously used for hunting, same purpose for everyone.
Right.
But the sources say they were different, distinctive for each group.
Yeah, this is really interesting. The type of flint they used, the specific shape of the point. It seems these acted almost like a clan signature.
Like you could tell who made it.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
It marked group identity. Whether that difference led to, friction, or maybe it helped in recognizing friendly groups, that's harder to say for sure.
Huh.
But the distinction itself is clear in the archaeology.
Okay, so we have this picture emerging. Movement, meeting places, exchange, group identity markers. How do we actually know this from so long ago? That's where the stones come in, right? The lithics.
Precisely. Lithics just means stone tools. And the study of these, especially flint, is incredibly powerful.
Why flint specifically?
Because flint isn't the same everywhere. Its geological makeup, its characteristics depend heavily on where it formed. It's like a geological fingerprint.
Ah, right. And that site you mentioned, Montlleó, they found a lot of flint there, didn't they?
A huge amount. The reports say over 25,000 pieces. Now, a lot of that is debris from making tools, but still around 2,000 finished tools and cores.
Cores being the sort of parent block they strike flakes off.
Exactly. So yes, a massive data set to work with.
And there's a specific research project focused on this. Speed-chert?
Yes, Beegerchert. Speed probably relating to speleology, caves, shelters, and for geology, chert being another word for flint-like stone. So, yeah, the project's goal was basically to use this flint evidence to trace the routes these Homo sapiens groups took across the Pyrenees.
To show the mountains were a corridor, not a wall.
That's the core idea, proving it was a passage.
And they found some surprising connections. I read something about flint from Chalas in France.
That's right. Tentatively identified, but yes. Flint that seems to originate from Chalos, which is way over in southwestern France.
Wow. That's quite a distance from the Pyrenees, isn't it?
It is, hundreds of kilometers. It really makes you think about how far these people, or at least their materials and connections, were ranging. It suggests, well, pretty extensive networks or maybe very long seasonal journeys.
So let's just break down why Flint is so good for this. You said the geological fingerprint thing?
Right, so researchers can take a tiny piece of flint found at, say, Montlleó, analyze its specific chemical makeup, that's the geochemical analysis part,
Okay.
and then they compare that chemical signature to known flint sources out in the landscape.
Which means they have to go and find those sources first, collect samples.
Exactly. A huge part of the work is geological surveying, building up a reference library of all the potential flint types in the broader region.
Okay.
And doing that, they start to see patterns. Certain types of flint seem to turn up more often and further away from their source. They call these the favorite flints.
Favorite, meaning like better quality, easier to work with.
Probably a mix of things. Maybe it flaked predictably, held a sharp edge longer, maybe it even looked appealing. But whatever the reason, these specific types circulated more widely.
Right. So they become really useful tracers for tracking movement. Let's walk through the methodology used in the study, the one in the Journal of Archaeological Science, reports. How did they piece it all together?
Okay, so first step. Identify those favorite flints, the ones that seem to travel.
The tracers.
Yep. Then map where these tracer flints are found archaeologically.
Yeah.
See how far they got from their known geological source. What's their distribution radius, basically?
And they looked at lots of sites, not just Montlleó.
Oh, yes. Over 20 sites on both the French and Spanish sides of the Pyrenees. They looked at finished tools, cores, flakes, the whole toolkit, essentially.
Then the geochemistry comes in to confirm the matches.
Absolutely crucial step. Matching the artifact's fingerprint to the source's fingerprint. That gives you the solid link. And then they layer on more information using GIS, geographic information systems.
Mapping software, basically.
Yeah, but powerful mapping software. They can add in the topography, the mountains, the valleys. They can even model likely climate conditions and glacier extents for that specific period thousands of years ago.
So you combine the Flint's journey with the actual landscape it had to cross.
Exactly. It helps you see the probable routes, which paths were easier, which valleys channeled movement.
And putting all that together, what were the main findings? What routes emerged?
The research strongly points to at least two major corridors being used regularly. Out west, there's the area they call the Basque Crossroads.
Okay.
And in the east, importantly, that Cerdanya Valley we talked about earlier where Montlleó is located, it seems to have been a really significant eastern route.
So the big takeaway is, this wasn't rare. People were definitely present, moving around in these high-altitude areas, even during the Ice Age.
That's the critical conclusion. The Pyrenees weren't this static, insurmountable barrier people assumed.
It really shifts the perspective, doesn't it? From just thinking about survival against the cold to seeing active, connected communities navigating this landscape.
Definitely. The mountains were a dynamic zone, a place of passage, interaction, exchange, not just a divider.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. What are the key things we should take away from this deep dive?
Well, I think first that Homo sapiens regularly crossed the Pyrenees, even during the Last Glacial Maximum, the really cold bit.
Right. They weren't just stuck on one side.
No. They used specific routes, like the Cerdanya Valley. They carried materials, especially flint, that act like breadcrumbs for us, letting us trace their movements and connections.
And these connections were real exchange of materials, meeting points.
Exactly. The mountains were actually facilitating interaction, not just blocking it.
And for you listening,
Yeah.
maybe the aha moment here is just realizing how interconnected these ancient people were, despite, Ice Age conditions, which sound incredibly harsh to us. There was travel, exchange, maybe shared knowledge. It wasn't just isolated groups struggling alone.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe.
Yeah.
If you think about the resourcefulness, the interconnectedness of these Ice Age travelers, what does that suggest about us? About a fundamental human drive to explore, to connect, even when things look impossible.
Oh.
And maybe what modern barriers that we assume are fixed could be physical, could be social, technological. Might future archaeologists look back and be surprised to find we crossed them all the time?